All right, folks, welcome back to our basically our end candid conclusion section of Kiwami 3. It's our 18th session. I was like fiddling around with maybe I could put the soundtrack, the Kiwami 3 soundtrack in the back, but I thought against it because there's a chance that there'll be like copyright and there'll be muting issues because a lot of the tracks have lyrics and singers, so we're gonna avoid that for now. So welcome to another candid conclusion. We reached the end of another video game project. This time it took 2 months because of language learning, and I have decided to try to do I've been thinking about how I can change up these formats in order to like best suit future projects and whatnot. And I've reorganized some of the sections. These will be true for any time I need to start a new project, which is opening opinion section. Long prolonged projects will have tentative takes, and also these end of projects, candid conclusions, are going to follow similar formats. I've been working over the last like 2 or 3 years to kind of strike a balance of these things. So we're gonna give it a go again. And at some point, I'm gonna try to break these up and chapter them and whatnot. It's it's a learning process that we have here. So let's go right into it. So how we're gonna do this? We're gonna use white to outline stuff. So as most things, I wanted to start. This is the candid conclusion section. So at the end of each project, I want to do a bit of self-reflection and maybe offer my observations and particular subjective pattern recognition things to share about the game as a form of self-evaluation reflection that maybe others can partake or chime in and contribute to the discussion. So these candid conclusions come in three positions. I think we're gonna do kind of a we're gonna do an RGB color. I haven't really decided on this part. So the first one, I usually start with the first section as facts, like by the numbers, but I think we're gonna change it up now. This is gonna be called the This is gonna be called the factors. So we're gonna have factors. That is gonna be the section 1, and factors are now going to be things that during the process of playing this game and also before playing this game and everything else, these are stuff that are typically observations. So observations. And from now on, they're going to be represented by a Likert scale, sort of like a rough Likert. Trying to figure out how to spell Likert, actually. There's a T in it. So they're going to be represented by a Likert scale in a way. And they usually represent, the observations represent the kind of A versus B situation that is relevant, that I find that is relevant, or I've seen in things like social media, right? So these are the facts that we're going to do, and they're called factors. So this is pretty much the most objective section. And that's where I feel is a good balance of where the internet comes in and they want to be interested. They want to see, is this game good or bad? Is this game trash or buy? Or is this game hard or easy? So it's going to be observations expressed in a Likert scale, comparing A versus B that are like classically at odds with each other. So they're like inversely related when it comes to talking about this game. What they are, we'll go over them. And then we have our second section. Our second section is going to be represented in blue. And that is the archetype section. So we're going to call it the archetypes. This is still what I'm referring. This has been very useful for me. An archetype section is about behavioral correlations that I observe. So this is a bit subjective because it goes through a filter. And what I mean by behavioral correlations are these are hypothetical like coinciding factors. So hypothetical coinciding factors. So I introduce the factors, and then there are hypothetical things that coincide or correlate, and these are going to represent kind of like different perspectives that I notice. Overall perspectives. And this will be contrasting, at least comparing and contrasting. We're going to say at least 3 groups. No, 2 groups. We'll say at least 2 groups, which will be revealed in a bit. And then our very last section, which I'm going to highlight in green. This is personal. So this would be my personal commentary. This deals with like my hot takes, right? Hot takes, opinions, as well as where I sit in reference to the like my hot takes, opinions, and where my biases are when it comes to the above, right? And that's where all my rant will be happening as well. So let's get to it, shall we? And this will provide a very I'm like working up the explainer again. This should provide a very streamlined experience where if you're staying for the factors. Hello again, Beth. Hello. So my attempt is that I needed to streamline the first. So this will be an inaugural for the factors thing. I've adjusted the archetypes. The personal section I practice a lot, right? Like I have hot takes, opinions, biases. That's my usual yap. That's these are the yap section, and I have a lot of commentary and yap, right? Commentary. So that will be color coded in green. Archetypes are something I practice a lot. I look at people's opinions, I look at population statistics, and then look at reviews, large body of data, and I try to create archetypes. The archetypes is to be a little bit more, instead of trying to predict every single individual's preferences and whatnot, like on a one-to-one basis, it's not scalable, it's not realistic. So I often offer my personal opinions when asked. I don't usually project my personal opinions, with the exception of these situations, right? So this is the opportunity that I have made for myself to offer my personal opinions on the archetypes. And archetypes are existing perspectives. So for example, the existing perspective of Resident Evil 9 Requiem is that it's an awesome game. That is an archetype. It's what is trending, it's coinciding, and then what the people that say Resident Evil 9 is good, what trends with that archetype. It's not to point fingers at any particular individual. It's how I evaluate so that I can give a more nuanced, but also it's a compromise between trying to generalize everyone, you know, trying to present universal truths like, oh, a good game is a good game, that type of thing. That's very reductive. So I tried to pick at least two controversial archetypes, or like archetypes that are at odds with each other, at least two, and then talk about the developers, or what I think the developer perspective is, and then my personal perspective. So there's at least 4 groups, but technically 2 large groups. Mine is like the third, and then the developer, what I think the developer is aiming for. And then the factors is where most people, like, I needed to work on this section because my facts, my observations are kind of like all over the place sometimes, and it's hard to organize. So now we're doing it this way, where we're gonna streamline it a bit, where I highlight the factors that are at both ends. So for example, game difficulty. There's hard and easy, and then a line in between. And that's how we're going to do it. We're going to list factors that are germane or relevant to the conversation in social media about this game. Because what I think about when I think about people looking at the beginning of any like review or early impressions or something, they're specifically looking for these things. Like, is it good? Is it bad? Is it actiony, or is it slow? Is it fast? And I'm going to highlight the very specific factors that are mentioned most regularly. So these are facts. These have been mentioned incredibly often. Whether how important they are, that's down to the archetypes. Archetypes are when you determine whether they are important or not to specific groups, and then personally, right? So we're going to try to highlight that. And this will create a really, hopefully, a nicer, neater presentation. And I've been working on this for some time after, but I forgot how long I've started this. Maybe like 20-ish games back. And we've gone through many iterations of this. So the first fact that comes up a lot when speaking about Kiwami 3 is preservation. Oh, wrong color. So it's often about preservation. On the one end, and innovation on the other end. Preservation and innovation. Today's update 100% your 28 questions on Rensho. Nice. Grammar quiz. Awesome. Congrats. That progress. So we have preservation and innovation. And you're still just managing casual form conjugations enough to get a second hanko in Wagotabi. Are there 3 hankos now? I think I've only gone up to the second one. I'm not sure if there was a third one. I'm not sure how far in they were on the third one. Interesting. There's preservation and innovation. It looks like it. Ooh, exciting. There's also volume. So volume would be, let's just say we're gonna go with kitchen sink. Oh no. Addition versus consolidation. Or a better word would be, yeah, consolidation. It kind of ties with the next one. Another controversial factor that comes up in Kiwami discussion is complexity. Versus streamline. Then we also have how did I say this? It's kind of on preservation and innovation, but it deals with its story content. So I'm gonna throw in my hat on this one too. Language. So there's also language. Language would be, we're gonna say, Japanese only. This is kind of a setup. Japanese only or multilingual. That's something that does come up, but in a different context. So I'll weigh in on that in a bit. There is also, how am I going to say this? Dark. So dark. Maybe like dark themed. What's another word for dark? Serious. We're gonna say serious in the sense of the theme versus kind of like casual. I don't know. Lighter. Well, brighter. Right. Serious and bright. Actually, darker is probably gonna be the way here. Another one is difficulty. So we got like hardcore, and softcore. It's probably not the greatest word, but we'll go with it. We're scratching the barrel now. It's kind of going from most frequent to bottom. And then we have also age. So like let's just say visual. So high fidelity. We'll say high fidelity. And not necessarily high fidelity, but budget. All right, budget or sufficient. I think this might make up for most of the stuff. Kind of want to make these lines similar to each other. Music kind of comes into play too. Music, I would say heavy versus easy listening. And I think that might be decent enough. I think we should, the complexity and streamline deals with mechanical depth. And then hardcore and softcore, got that. Did we get volume, addition, and consolidation? Okay. There's also timelines. So canon and we're gonna call it spin-offs. It's kind of a moot point near the end. All right, so these are the factors that I want to cover. They're not quite the most they're not quite the quite the words that people use. I will chime in with my personal things about these. So preservation is keep it the same. Right. Innovation would be change it. Addition would be everything. Addition is about like have 100% of everything and then add new stuff on top and add on top. These are kind of like the phrases you would hear. And consolidation would be trim, right? Trim the fat, just the meat, right? Then for complexity is more mechanics. More mechanics, the better. Just enough. Not overly complicated, right? This is self-explanatory, Japanese only. Focus equals quality. Accessibility. And diversity. This is going to become a very relevant talking point. Darker, like, violence. Right? Violence, death, consequences. Brighter would be like hopeful, redemption. Then when it comes to hardcore, like difficult. Right? Difficult achievements. And softcore would be like lenient or forgiving. A vibe. high fidelity would be good graphics, animation, right? That's usually phrase. The budget would be like good enough, use imagination. Heavy and easy listening, right, like rock, saturation, hype. Easy listening would be kind of like often it's eclectic. Eclectic mix. And then we have canon and spin-off. So canon is like adding to existing. And spin-off is different direction. So I basically highlighted a bunch of things that I hear a lot when regarding these. So now we want to talk about the archetypes. There are two major archetypes that are constantly in two major perspectives. Maybe I should change the name to perspectives. There are two major perspectives are, we have the perspective of the legacy player. Change different. So we have the legacy player on the one hand, and then we have the new, right, newish, we're gonna say newish player. They're not necessarily on one side, but newish player. Or the prospective player. I think that's also valid. Prospective player. And in order to facilitate this, we're gonna use this scale. So in the perspective of the legacy player, it's very strong, and these are quite legacy players. I feel like they gravitate towards preservation when it comes to Kiwami, this game. So I would say they lean towards preservation over innovation. Obviously in an ideal world, it would be like right down the middle, but I don't think so. I think they actually lean towards preservation. And when it comes to legacy players, it's all about the addition to things. A consolidation seems as a cheapening effect of legacy, right? That's what the trend that I've gathered from. And then when it comes to most of these games, especially the combat-oriented game, complexity is king. More mechanics, more styles, more challenges. That's the idea of a legacy player. Like, these are prospective. The two largest groups are either legacy players or the prospective newer player. Anywhere in between is still not that consistent. So in my opinion, when RGG was making this game, that's what they're aiming for. They're trying to bridge between a legacy player and a prospective new player. At most, a new player that's played Yakuza 0, Kiwami 1, and Kiwami 2, right? And of course, legacy players are naturally Japanese only, because not necessarily because they don't care about other languages. That's overreaching. Typically, it's because the legacy of this game was in Japanese only at that time, and it's a long legacy, a very long legacy. And because they are also legacy players of this, there's a huge enrichment for darkness. So you want dark themes, dark tones, consequences, brutality. That type of thing was what the Kiryu Saga leaned towards. I don't necessarily think they even gravitate towards any form of brightness in general. And when it comes to difficulty achievements, I think it's it's somewhere here. It's not like full stop, let's just make this incompletable because of some skill level issue. It's often like a combination of feeling powerful, like a power trip, and difficulty. And often it's also completionist oriented. And when it comes to graphics, I think the legacy player is understanding. So it's somewhere here where they're not expecting you to like pull out a 5090, like a 5090 to run. There's a balance. There's an appreciation for like trying to hold the fidelity. However, it's kind of leaning on like they're hoping that it would increase in fidelity over time, right? What you call it, when it comes to music, it's heavily weighted on the rock side, because if you're a legacy player, you are very synonymous with the age-old stuff as opposed to the eclectic stuff that's going on now, reflective of its time. It's a lot on the heavier side. And then obviously legacy players will without a doubt favor canon, right? So to me, these are the things that I feel would represent the target audience on the particular issues that came up, which is the idea of these various factors, right? When it comes to language, the story, the mechanics, the tone, the music, the visuals. One of the biggest audiences would be gravitating. These are deliberate because they're bipolar in general. I pick two perspectives that tend to be bipolar, right? Because the internet is either you're in group 1 or you're in group 2. You're either yes or you're no. But I wanted to present it as a Likert because sometimes it's like a lean, but not so much. In this case, what this is, I'm trying to represent here is that the Yakuza Legacy player, the one that is looking to play Kiwami 3, is really kind of niche. It's incredibly niche still, right? So what is the newish player? Let's say we put ourselves in the mind of the Yakuza 0 and Kiwami 1, Kiwami 2 aspect, right? At most, or someone who's completely uninitiated and they want to play Kiwami 3, which is not quite the target audience in my opinion. It's going to be very rare that is going to break into that. So when we're talking about newish players, we're talking probably in the concept that this newish player is probably coming from Yakuza 0, Kiwami 1, and Kiwami 2. So without opening up that can of worms, I understand what is in Yakuza 0 and Kiwami 1 and Kiwami 2, and they do bring these up measurably in the review section. So often, if you're playing Yakuza 1, Kiwami 2 in that order, they don't follow technical specs technically, but Kiwami 1, Yakuza 0, Kiwami 1 did follow Yakuza 0, technically speaking, on a technological development cycle. And then Kiwami 2 did follow Kiwami 1. And then Kiwami 3 does follow Kiwami 2 in development cycle. So, like, in the development order, this is still the development order. So, when you're thinking about you're coming from a newish player, typically the thing is more innovation. So they lean towards more innovation. Like, what is the next new thing? Like this new title, it's gonna produce something. Because Yakuza 0 was noticeably different from Kiwami 1, despite like their shared legacy. Maybe the combat is kind of, but what is expected is with everyone. You put a lot of thoughts into these parameters. Yeah, these usually take quite a long time to disseminate. I wish I could be a little faster, so I'm kind of working on representing them a little bit quicker. But yes, this is what goes on in my head. This is when I talk to someone, like someone comes to me and they would say what their opinions are. This is how I organize the information. Like, okay, so how can I talk to this person? That's basically what I think about, because I don't want to sound like I don't care about the person. So immediately, like, this is not a very specific person, right? We're not talking about specific people. That's prejudice. If you act and presume these are true about the person, that is prejudice, right? It's kind of discriminatory. What I use is I organize as much information as I can, and then when I talk to someone, I get to learn and tweak what the representative body is. That's how I offer quote unquote advice or recommendation. When someone asks me, do you have any advice or recommendation? I usually ask, can you tell me something about yourself? The more you can tell me in a short amount of period of time, the more I have already prepped myself for these. So before I write these reviews and I even go into the game, I actually do the same thing going into a project. So what happens is then I have a semblance where to start. And then it is up to the person, every individual person, to verify these things. Because a real person, you know, like a person that's can be a combination of these things. So what I'm trying to do is I provide an archetype. These archetypes will line up, as in if you're a newish player to Kiwami 3, you are likely going to lean towards these things. So it's a representation. So it's kind of like a slider, you know, like when you're playing a video game. I'm representing this way because it kind of looks like a video game as well. This type of representation is a little bit more dynamic than the representation of saying, oh, you're either a preservationist or you're an innovator. You're either one. That's not true. It's on a slider, really, right? Because you can be a mix of all these. So for this, when it comes to consolidation, usually Yakuza 0, Kiwami 1, and Kiwami 2, all of them had, they are typically more used to lean, high, like resolved content, because Yakuza 0 had a lot of content in it for sure. It actually might have had too much for a newish player. And then Kiwami 1 was fairly lean. It was very lean compared to Yakuza 0. Then Kiwami 2 was even leaner than Kiwami 1. So relatively speaking, it would be very normal for a newish player to lean towards consolidation. Because it's not, they've already developed an idea of not quite saying, oh, just give me everything in the kitchen sink. I want to play this game for 600 hours. Yakuza 0 is one of the longest titles in the series, and for completion it's like 130 hours, like casual. Kiwami 1 is 30 hours, and then Kiwami 2 is like 20 hours. So Kiwami 3 for me, and then when I was data mining and looking at other sources, it sits around 30 hours. So typically it's about trimming the fat and consolidating to have different experiences. So going from Yakuza 1 to Kiwami 1 to Kiwami 2 to Kiwami 3, all of the aspects are different. So it's not about adding on top of something. The substantial number is nearly all of them are very different from each other. So it's kind of like a variety. So if you're coming from the perspective of newest player, Yakuza 0 doesn't quite play like Kiwami 1 despite having the same system. And then Kiwami 1 plays nothing like Kiwami 2. And then Kiwami 2 is still on the same engine technically as Kiwami 3, but it doesn't play like it anymore. So most of the time, if you're starting with this in this role, you lean towards innovation and you lean towards consolidation. Basically, you want a package that's around 30 hours because arguably Yakuza 0 for completion rates is very low. It drops off at like 20 hours max. So they're hitting somewhere around 20 to 30 hours. So any beyond that can be superfluous. It can be irrelevant to a newish player. They want the satisfaction of completing the game and also giving the skippy, the innovation. So that's why they lean towards the opposite side of this. Obviously, this is suggesting that they still want preservation and addition if they can perceive it. But it's really not about that because there are no precedents for it. Like, they haven't played Yakuza 3 Remastered. So naturally, you wouldn't know what you're missing unless you're getting your information from legacy players. The moment a newish player says, hey, what do you think I should learn? What do you think makes Kiwami 3 better? Oh no, Yakuza 3 Remastered is better. It's like, but I'm talking about Kiwami 3. That's why these discussions are at odds with each other. In fact, oftentimes I feel like the newish player, outside of some political stuff, do not line up with legacy players. There are other games where the legacy player and the newish player lines up, and that's when games really are great because they're not divisive. This game is incredibly divisive, and it's dealing with its legacy a lot of times, where the perspective's coming from. So in terms of the newest player, oftentimes actually streamlining is kind of a big deal, largely because it has to play smoothly. It has to be enough to not overstay its welcome. That is the newer player population. When you are a legacy player, you can't get enough of this. Like, you're invested, right? Like for me, I'm a legacy player, right, in this regards. So if they added like 14 different styles, like they put every single fighting style they've ever iterated into this game, I'm all for it. When you're a newer player, you're like, all right, well, it's around 30 hours, right? Meanwhile, you're like looking at a 300-hour game. It's like, I'm not gonna use like 90% of this. Can you like just make 2 styles very good, like put all your efforts into 2 styles and then not like give me like 15 styles of which 13 of them I don't even play? Like, I'm not gonna play the game that long. That is why streamline, they have to meet a combination. And then when it comes to newish players, without a doubt, it's a lean towards multilingual because there's no predilection yet. And oftentimes, despite what the vocal minority is, and this is also true about like media right now, like movies, televisions, the really loud people are, in my opinion, are the minority. They are the ones where like, this is the way it should be. This is how it is. It's always been this way. While I do feel that SEGA and RGG of SEGA understands that in order to reach a larger audience, and an audience that are far more eclectic than it used to be, like back in the day when Yakuza 3 Remaster came out, their audience were probably largely English speakers and or Japanese people who are already invested in the idea of whether they can comprehend Japanese, or the idea of it only sounds authentic that way. Nowadays, RGG is trying to expand, and due to the rising popularity of the current games, which do deal with multilingualism, including the languages of the largest market, is also catering to the idea that they will likely have newish players that do not have, they can gain accessibility through multilingualism. It is specifically said in a couple interviews that that's their goal. So how's this true? I'm not going to play Yakuza 0, Kiwami 1, Kiwami 2 yet again, but they retroactively added English and Chinese, I think to 0. I'm not sure about 1. 1 got a refresh, and 2 also got a refresh. So they're systematically catching up Chinese, English, and Japanese. But Japanese was already there, so they're retroactively adding Chinese and Japanese to all of their titles as they're going. There's still 4 and 5 that requires that TLC. So that's kind of what they're trying to do, or they're replacing them because they want the game to be represented in multiple languages, right? They're coming up soon. But for now, the newish player would often find that if they can see their game in their other languages, it's fantastic. It's an extra thing that is wonderful to see. If you don't like, if you're wondering, oh man, RGG must be really, no, see, let's just talk about CDPR, like Cyberpunk 2077. It has 9 languages, right? So that's kind of the idea. Like, it is very humbling and awesome to have these, but it does come with diminished return. And that's that the legacy player could care less. And what their largest audience is still technically their legacy players. The newish players are starting to outnumber them. That's why the swaying of the design choices, in my opinion, is creating divisiveness. Now, when it comes to the newish player, we're talking about Yakuza 0, Kiwami 1, and Kiwami 2. It's still on the darker side. Honestly, it's still on the darker side, but I would say that it's about here, right? It's about here where they're expecting. Yakuza Kiwami 3 is when things start kind of getting a little goofy, and the dark tones are going away and going towards whimsical. So I don't think it takes these to create the darkness in it. I think you have to take into account that the sheer volume of a legacy player is they played through and it was a different time. I think newer players nowadays are proliferated and exposed to a brighter, balanced stories, like stories that have edges, like elements of hope and inconsequentialness and power tripping that doesn't involve like the really heavier tones of their time. So I genuinely do believe that if you do a doom and gloom game, you will probably appeal to a very specific subset of the larger market. And newish players, while they still lean towards dark, this is one aspect that I feel newish players and legacy players will likely agree on. They lean towards the same side. Now, when it comes to hardcore and softcore, Yakuza 0 is pretty hardcore. Kiwami 1 just backed it up a little, like just backed up a bit. And Kiwami 2 backed up really far. So ultimately, when I think about like how hardcore and softcore things, usually newish players are going to lean towards softcore. A bit lenient, it's more about the vibe, completing the story. Not that far apart, but usually people tend to be a balanced approach. We're not talking about like to provide a contrast. We're not talking about Elden Ring, for example, or like a FromSoft game where the legacy players would slap to one side. In fact, new players alike would expect that. They go into a FromSoft game expecting to get slapped. I don't think this is the case for either legacy player, or there's a lean towards difficulty because there's a legacy of being difficult to complete. Not necessarily all tied with gameplay. Newish players now, if you played Yakuza 0, Kiwami 1, Kiwami 2, still on the softcore side. When it comes to budget sufficiencies, I don't think there's enough realization of what RGG can do or can't do comparing. So oftentimes I feel RGG is seen as a AA developer because their budget is restricted, and oftentimes the setting is that you're going from Yakuza 0 and Kiwami 1 to the Dragon Engine, Kiwami 2 and Kiwami 3, and I think they're very representative of each other. So they're a little bit more lenient on the graphical fidelity of things, because I don't think RGG would present any more than that. And even the legacy player would say like, yeah, it's ailing, you know, it's a aging system, but it's been like that, so we know it. There's not a strong precedence that suddenly RGG is gonna break out an Unreal 5 title for Like a Dragon or something like that. Right? Then we have the easy listening heavy. I think newish players may like the music that is in Yakuza 0, like Kiwami 1 and Kiwami 2. I think it's a little bit more so that they have balanced taste. Because if I had to take a category of other games, nowadays games have hybrid albums. It's about, oh, what would they sound next? What would be the next sound, kind of thing, as opposed to specifically catering to a very specific genre of music. Quite a little bit more eclectic. This part is we're getting like to the weaker things, and then we have a really controversial one. So in most cases, when you think about the newer game, they are balanced, because anything is new. There's no canon to hold on to. You don't need to do canon, so they're both open to, oh, okay, so this is how it was, or sure, whatever I'm playing is whatever I'm playing, so it would be in the spin-off category, so they would be neutral, right? Now, where is this all going? Well, there's obviously a third group, and the third group is right in the middle, and that's RGG. And this, I'm going to put RGG in quotes. This is my interpretation from the game. Like, where do I think RGG and SEGA end up on this game? To give you like a relative idea of how like turned off you might be. So if you're a legacy player and you haven't picked up Kiwami 3 yet, right? And if you're a newish player and you're just waiting it out and on a good sales, you know, like a little later in the year, there's gonna be discounts or something like that. You just haven't gotten around to playing it because there are other games, right? Plenty of other games. I think RGG, where RGG hit was, RGG did end up hitting over here. Not quite legacy, but they were aiming for preservation. They leaned away from innovation. They did a little bit more than a legacy player would like, so to speak. And when it comes to addition and consolidation, they consolidated. They actually, if I were to take into the weight of this, they might have consolidated a bit more than what a newish player would expect. So there might be less-ish content than even newish player who played Yakuza 0, Kiwami 1, Kiwami 2 kind of expected more volume, right? However, it's about the quality, right? And the quality is what they were aiming at. In terms of the complexity and streamlining, there was far more streamlining. Like, in fact, I would say even more so streamlining than the newish player would expect. I actually think someone who played Yakuza 0, Kiwami 1, and Kiwami 2 would expect a little bit more depth than what they had. So, like, 2 styles, 2.5 styles is a little underwhelming given Yakuza 0, Kiwami 1, and then Kiwami 2 was a dragon switch, and that was divisive because of the streamlining. And then multilingualism, I think they nailed it on top. So they share a line with newish players at the expense of the very verbal legacy player who could care less. Like, it's not that there are even bad actors who would go out of my way. I experience this on a daily basis, actually, when I'm playing the later titles, where there are even bad actors who would go out to like pitchfork other people for playing it in different languages. It doesn't happen too often. They are bad actors. Legacy players simply are apathetic. They don't care if it's in English or in Chinese. What they might slightly care about is how much resources does that take. Like, if you focused on Japanese only, you can liberate your resources to put back into the game instead of putting in another language. I'm not saying this to demonize them or vilify them. I'm saying these are pragmatic rationales, right? If you're working on a game to multi-dub it, that also costs resources. So when someone only cares about one medium, then any medium that they're paying for, right? If you're paying for this does happen. It's happening now, where this multilingualism, you have people who argue that because of this, the directors, for example, the director's cut of Yakuza 0 got a price bump. It is also true with all of the other ones. So they repackaged and then delist. It's a very controversial move. They delist the old ones, despite being the same package, but with two languages on top. And even reasonable legacy players, not even the bad actors, would voice like, well, what's the point? Like, Japanese is the only thing you want. Like, why would you give another reason to milk other people and cause double purchasing if all the only difference is another dub language, right? So I can sympathize with that for sure, because you delist the old ones, right? So that's kind of a rough spot that I totally like concede to, despite it increasing accessibility. So now let's go back to where our SEGA is. When it comes to the current RGG, this is one of the most divisive ones, and oftentimes most of RGG's choices when they are writing is leaning on the brighter side of things. They're a little bit wackier. Things are not permanent. There's less consequences, and it's to provide a more casual simi like thing where you're not getting beaten over the head with fatalism, deterministic violence, like racism and discrimination. It's more, how you say, PG-13, right? It's a bit brighter, whimsical, and that is one of the strongest divisive points. So you're kind of starting to, I'm illustrating all the thumbs downs and all the divisive points that you collect in reviews without pointing to any specific details. Like, I'm not gonna go and quote someone who's like giving RGG like they're garbage because they only like to create and write zany stuff instead of having people like beat each other brutally and whatnot. These are the vivid examples of most of the reviews. And the distance between Sega's perspective and the legacy players represent that division. So oftentimes the newish players are okay with Kiwami 3 because it kind of aligns in their alignment. But like, for example, preservation innovation, that is a common criticism of this game, where there wasn't enough preservation of like all of the stuff that they expect. So that is a common criticism for both parties. So these are the negatives. So these are when you get thumbs down. The either player, it doesn't resonate with most of the players, right? Because these represent. This one is divisive, right? So whenever you see Sega leaning towards one where there's a split, it creates division. That's why, in my opinion, this title has been incredibly divisive. But the strongest, hardest parts are when both of these are on the opposite side of Sega. Having Kiwami 3 have campier additions was not as well received as keeping the darkness in the game series. So like double downing on the darker tones of the game. If they added more story elements, they would be darker in nature, as opposed to brighter zany, because it contrasts with the legacy of Yakuza 0, Kiwami 1, and Kiwami 2. At least that's kind of how I see it. And when it comes to the hardcore, softcore, Sega has gone far to the, like, RGG has gone way towards the other end. It's to the point where you can hear comments from people who play any amount of Yakuza games, especially the ones where this is another divisive point, where it's like, well, you kind of just sneeze and sleep through the gameplay because none of that is engaging anymore. It feels like they're rehashing the same things and you just simply press one button, auto win buttons and stuff, right? And even the newish players can give it a pass. A lot of the newish players can give it a pass because, alright, I mean, like, I'm not really looking for it. But I don't think it's overlooked by legacy players. Where, like, oh, give me some of the trials or push the combat to a punishing amount. Like, nowadays, you just chalk up and chug back health pots it's everywhere, right? There's no resetting or difficulty. That's kind of one of the things. And for me, this is a contentious point. I think Sega, from the past entries and whatnot, this is obviously Sega's budget. So this is a Kiwami is a budget off-season effort, and that's not bad or good. Is that it's not the canonical Like a Dragon 9. Like a Dragon 9, the budget is going to be as high fidelity as possible. So this is a way to go back and touch up something else with a budget-minded, streamlined consolidation approach. They're trying to update Yakuza 3, 4, and 5 in that way. And I don't think they were trying to hide that. Like, Pirate Yakuza is also a budget sufficient oriented title. Like a Dragon Gaiden is also. So oftentimes there is a lean for legacy players, and that creates a conflict of interest. Like, oh, well, how can you treat Yakuza 3 remastered like this? You should have spent more time when making the characters pay attention. They look kind of ugly and it looks like they didn't put enough budget in it. It still can happen because we love these games, right? We, the people who have already invested, they kind of hope that RGG has all the budget in the world to do so, right? So it can be a little diminishing when, despite the reality that it is a budget sufficient game title. And here is a little bit of a tough part. So heavy and easy listening, I don't think they've actually, when I'm thinking about the music, I actually think they're somewhere in the middle, because the remixes or like the edits and inserts, I don't feel the heaviness and the of the old stuff. I think there has been some remix, some removals, and oftentimes it's pretty eclectic. And occasionally you have one that resonates with you, and then the next one. Even more so that I would actually argue maybe it's not even here. It's like slightly to the right. Why do I think it's slightly to the right in the easy listening department? Because oftentimes when you have pieces that are incredibly easy listening, you also don't hear them too often. They're like background music. So when I mean heavy, I also mean like hyped. as maybe this might be nostalgia talking, but oftentimes when you think of the mainline games or like the older games, they center around very iconic music, and that iconic music hits really hard. When I was playing this game, I didn't quite notice the background music outside of one or two tracks. Now, there is a chance that Yakuza 3 Remastered was very similar. My nostalgia is telling me that it wasn't quite that unnoticeable. So whatever the EQing or the mixing was, it made the game less about the music. In the game itself, like when you're going to battle and whatnot. Like for example, yesterday I was playing P5X, and the basic music background of a stage is like legitimately iconic. Like it's so hard, like, oh man, I really like this track, holy. And that's just one level. So maybe it might be the sheen that's kind of needs some buffering, but they didn't up the music game. The music game was sufficient. It was very easy listening. It's sufficient to complement the background. In fact, I can't there I think Mine's track, like on the top, which doesn't last very long if you're like in combat, you can't pay attention, that there are very specific tracks that are still wonderfully heavy, as in noticeably iconic. But the vast majority of the music mixing is easy listening, so it serves as background music. It belongs in the background. Like a good pair of contrasts for what constitutes as heavy music, like heavy and impactful, is that when you play Clear Obscure, you go into a new area and the music just slaps you in the face. Like, yeah, I'm in a new area now. And then you go into a new boss, the music slaps you in the face. Like, yeah, this is a new boss, a new type of encounter. And you encounter a new character, the music still slaps you in the face, right? Because the character has his own theme. Again, we have to keep in mind, easy listening is also budget friendly. Like, they're not going to go back and remix a lot of things. Another great example, I'm going to start my Persona Legacy soon. Persona 3 Reloaded legitimately is going to get an update where they add new musical tracks to the game. So like, it is possible to invest and double down on music. That's not where RGG was aiming for, right? They were aiming for some easy listening, sufficient, maybe add one or two tracks or remix one or two tracks and touch it up. That's kind of why, in my opinion, when you see the reviews, music comes up as well. A legacy player would say like, dude, the music sounds so generic, like what happened to it? Like, there's even a mod to mod in the old music from the Yakuza 3 Remastered. So I like to believe, even though I haven't played Yakuza 3 Remastered, that it was a little too easy listening. Easy listening is like playing, I don't know, your Minecraft game, right? Maybe not Minecraft. Let's not pick on Minecraft. Like, you're playing a game and you're fighting, but you knew there was music in the background, but you didn't remember what it sounded like. That is easy listening, because easy listening is, it's not obtrusive, it doesn't distract you, sufficient. And that's kind of how I felt about it. It's not true for when I played through the Yakuza games before, especially like Judgment and stuff. Like, sometimes I would pause the game and I would simply just listen to the music. And I'm quite avid about music. I mean, my last stream was literally talking about the 2 or 3 karaoke tracks over and over again. So, be it as it may, easy listening. And then here's a wild thing, right? Now, it's kind of hard. They did stick with canon. I think for the most part, they did stick with canon. But Sega had an intent, and they were having an intent to spin off. Like, the canon, while the canon was largely preservation, so like Sega was trying to aim for preservation of the story, all of that, in my opinion, served for the idea of spinning off. And it's pretty clear now with like interviews and whatnot that the whole idea is to spin off. And that is one of the most controversial. So if you're looking at this chart here, right, we can definitely come to highlight what are the most controversial points in this game, especially in the review. It was not the same. So one of the loudest things are not the same. Right? Another very controversial point, but slightly not as big. Like this would be like one of the bigger ones. So we're gonna give this like 3 stars. Addition was like 2 stars. 2 stars of intensity, which is why'd you cut things? Things were cut, right? You're supposed to be adding on top 100% and more. So the idea is the combination of addition and preservation is that all of Yakuza 3 Remastered should still be in that game, in this game, and then you add on top of it. So the basic lining is that everything in Yakuza 3 should have been in this game, and then you add, and it didn't happen. That's one of the biggest criticisms of the divisiveness of those who would say, I don't like this game, right? And then complexity is a really big one, but not so much in terms of like overall. I would say newest players are pretty much overall satisfied. So it's a double star, which is like, why, dude, the game only has two styles? The heck, dude? Where's my 4 styles or 6 styles? Or why is Mine's section so weak and vanilla and streamlined, right? So these make up the bulk of the divisiveness. And then this one has faded. This one has largely faded. It's a 1 star. And it's self-explanatory. We've already made a comment about the director's cut and whatnot. It's a 1 star. You can hear it attached to these things occasionally, but generally this is the main dissatisfaction most of the time. And this one is a triple star. The whole idea is that the Kiryu saga is darker than the Kasuga saga, but a lot of the Kasuga mentality that comes from their recent designs was used as a counter argument against their brighter things, right? So in this case, it's like, can we stop talking about rainbows? Where's the grittiness, right? Where's the grittiness? In fact, this is so strong that many people would crack jokes about Nagoshi's next title, which is Gang of Dragons. Right on the head, right? Gang of Dragons. And they were already saying like, yup, I'm out. I'm gonna go play a serious gritty game that Nagoshi will bring in Gang of Dragons, right? So people were hungry for a darker additional, so like darker additional thing that adds to like additional darker elements added to the preservation on top of what is available. And one of the biggest criticism that's consistent is the idea that Sega is a little bit brighter now. Like RTG has a bit of a brighter spin. In fact, all the additions that were there are brighter. They are less gritty. They are a little whimsy. Nearly all of the addition is slightly more whimsier and less dark. Like Mine's like Dark Tides, like contrary to the title Dark Tides was not as dark as it could have been. In my opinion, they could have leaned harder, but it was balanced, and it was balanced with brightness despite the dire situations, right? It's very new aged Casca saga thing. I haven't wrote my opinions yet, so we'll see how controversial it is. How it contrasts with the others. So when it comes to hardness, right? I think this was a pass. This is I think it's more like a 1-star, where 1-star hate, and the consequence is the idea is, well, the combat is simplified, it's streamlined, there's not a lot of complexity, so then there's no difficulty. Like, let's just say there's no challenge. That is a criticism that is less, has waned off, like it has been weaned off recently. This used to be a really big contentious point. Nearly every Yakuza game kept getting quote-unquote easier to complete, more vibey, more like softcore, right? Softcore. And I think since then there has been laxing of that. And then when it comes to fidelity, 1-star. Actually, this it's pretty passable. Most people can understand that things cost money. You can still use your imagination. It's about the vocal performance, and that's fair enough, right? And when it comes to music, this is starting to become a thing where, like, where's the hard-hitting tracks? And I think newer players can definitely appreciate that, given the Yakuza 0 soundtrack. I'm not sure about Kiwami 1 and Kiwami 2. I think Kiwami 1 and Kiwami 2 pretty interesting. Yakuza 5 is like, that stuff slaps. So anyway, and then this is the last contention point. This is 3 stars. Canon, despite 99, like nearly 95% or more of the story staying strictly, right, preserved up here, it is what they decide to change for a potential spin-off that created like retcon. How they approached it is, it was borderline retcon, like for those who are vocal. Borderline retcon in order to create the spin-off, like Mine's thing, which I talked about many times, so I don't have to belabor the part. A retcon would insist that it was made clear somehow through the characters, and then now it no longer is clear. It was often when a character falls out of like the screen or something, it was never really clear. Like, even in Yakuza 0, Kiwami 1, Kiwami 2, these things are part of the dramatic nature of this type of writing. And besides that, it's still the most divisive thing is they changed minimally, but those minimal changes dealt with the idea of taking a new direction, and that created incredible conversations and divisiveness. The biggest topics are, right, the 3. It didn't preserve everything so that you can add on top of it. Like, leave things untouched because legacy players like legacy. So leave things untouched, add on top of it. That didn't really happen. It happened mostly for the preservation, but there was lack of addition. Right, just a complete lack of addition. And then the addition was not dark. It was just not dark. It felt like it's out of place. It contrasts with Kiwami, like the sequence. Like Kiryu Saga is typically a lot darker, on the darker side. Solemn, defeatist, fatalism, nihilistic, and then the retcon. Right. All the others, I would say, come in different flavors that aren't as dramatic. Now we come down to the last one, right? So where do I sit on this? And usually people ask me about my opinions every once in a while when they care about it. And you can kind of already gathered where I was by my commentary on this. So, I have played every single modern Yakuza Like a Dragon game. And actually I've been keep up on it. The only, when I say modern, is because I haven't played Ishin, which is like a parallel universe in feudal Japan situation, and then there's the spin-off that I don't have access to, right? But outside of that, every particular thing that's related to this, I've played multiple times, multiple dubs, and tried my best to keep most of that information in, right? And I've been doing this routine for nearly all of them. And where do I sit on this? For me, I'm gonna be real. This was a mixed bag for me too. When it comes to games, I'm actually pro innovation. So I'm like far right on innovation. If you tossed everything out and then went with a different direction, I'm good to go. When it comes to like innovation first. So if someone is saying, where do I fall on this continuum? I fall in the far towards innovation. I understand preservation, but preservation exists already for me, right? You have to take it from my standpoint. I own the game. I played Yakuza 3 Remastered. I don't want to play it again. Like I'm okay with preserving its nature, but it is not how I evaluate video games. I don't evaluate something on how much same it is, like how same it is. I typically like when I can tell the developer, I'm a minority, you can see this, like I'm not even aligned with any of these three lines, which represent certain interest, right? Like maybe the SEGA's investment and then the two major groups. I'm not even aligned with them. So I'm a minority when it comes to these things, and it's an extreme one. The more extreme you are, the more minority you are, right? If you're super heavy innovation, there are gonna be less people with you. And there's no stretch of the imagination that someone would come up to me and say like, yeah, it doesn't matter if they preserve the things. This is a remake after all, right? Like just remake the whole thing. Or like do an entirely different combat system. Change up all the mini games. I'm for that. That's my personal preference. When I play a video game, I like to buy and tell RGG that go wild. If my word mean anything, which it doesn't mean that much because I represent minority group, do and be creative as much as you want. You are not to be shackled by continuity or something like that, because I don't like the idea that I am the burden that restricts their creativity, because I like buying games of which I cannot create myself. If I wanted to preserve things, it would definitely not be to preserve things I already know, because that to me is boring. It means I'm buying the same thing again. What legacy players, in my opinion, want is they want to buy everything. They want to have everything and also buy all the innovation. So they want RGG to produce everything again, and on top of that, give them $70 of value of innovation. So they want both, the cake and eat it. And for myself, I'm willing to give up preservation. Like if you don't have enough resources to preserve the legacy of Yakuza 3 Remastered, unfortunately again it got delisted, but keep that on the list and change it all up, which is how it sounds like they're going to do it in the next game after Kiwami 3, the not Yakuza 4, possibly. But I'm pro innovation. And when it comes to a consolidation edition, honestly, I'm right down the middle. Because if you consolidate, it's got to be new things. If you're doing addition, oftentimes that they are adding volume, and all volume, easy way to add volume is to add all the old stuff back. I don't want to play all the old stuff, so it's kind of a mix. You want to consolidate the old stuff and give it the best. Like, you want to trim the old stuff. If it has 100, like one of the arguments is, if it has 119 sub stories, I want 30. Like, I expected like 20 of the finest consolidations of the 119 sub stories, and then that's great. It's great. It's streamlined. It trims the fat. And then when you consolidate, you also leave room for new stuff, which they did throw in a few new stuff, but it kind of felt like they spent more time preserving. So it's an ebb and flow. I'm in the middle here. Now, when it comes to complexity and streamlining, in the middle. In the middle, maybe I would say I would lean towards a little bit of complexity, largely because it would allow them to innovate on something. But not too far from the middle. I think over complexity is a more of a representation of someone who identifies as a Like a Dragon player. I don't identify as an RGG only playing game. There are tons of other games, and they vary in complexity and streamlining. I can appreciate that streamlining will help me appreciate the meat, not the fat of the stuff. So I still consider myself relatively a casual Like a Dragon player. And if you think this is hardcore, like if someone says like, oh, you talk about Like a Dragon a lot, it's like, I talk about things that I like a lot, and Like a Dragon barely eclipse how much hours I put into other things. Like, I'm quite a hardcore person per se, in the sense that I try my best to enjoy and understand the things I choose to do. So in a way, you could take it with a grain of salt. Some people's complexity is not my complexity, but I would like to think that the legacy player is still more hardcore than me. They want to sink like 600 hours into playing the game in 14 different styles and then see how much they can juggle combo into things. I've seen it. It exists. And kudos to those guys, especially Yakuza 0 content, right? Fair enough. And also like Judgment, like Lost Judgment stuff. For myself, no compromise. Multilingualism. It's part of one of the biggest reasons why I buy these games. Actually, that's why it lines up so well. It's pretty much a little bit to the right of SEGA. So the reason why I'm playing this game now, like in this moment, and doing all the reviews and stuff, is because of language learning. So, to me, RGG missed with innovation. They missed with consolidation balance. They missed with complexity lean, but they hit for multilingual stuff. Like, whenever someone talks to me outside of Kiwami 3, I'd be language learning. So oftentimes the conversation is, oh, what have you been doing other than that? Oh, I've been playing Kiwami 3. It's like, oh yeah? It's like, why play Kiwami 3? It's like, it has multiple languages. It has the 2 languages that I am working on. That's the conversation starter, right? So that's where Sega's got the reason why I bought the game, just to clarify, so that people don't get the wrong idea when someone stops in and say like, dude, ew, like English, and I'm like, yeah, there's also Chinese. Do you think Chinese is ew too? Like, it's important to me. So when someone trivializes the most important aspect of buying these games when I'm playing them, I hope that's not surprising anymore. And for me here, when it comes to darker and brighter, I actually lean towards slight brightness. I'm a very hopeful person. So Sega still hits pretty well. Casca Saga, I lean towards Casca Saga. Hopeful, redemption. In fact, I'll probably put this slightly closer to where Sega is. Some of the zany stuff is pushing it a little further down, but this is also a reason I look forward to. I look forward to the brighter redemption arc ideas, like where people are hopeful, they make mistakes, and they come back stronger. Like I love the comeback story, right? The path of redemption, um, changes, experiences make a better person. That's where I where like when someone decides to say, like, hear me out. I can enter these arguments sometimes when someone says, oh yeah, the whole weight of it is this person decide to take their life, and like, sorry, a little censorship there. They're like sacrifice themselves, right? They sacrifice themselves. Like, well, I mean, they could have done more with their life instead of sacrifice themselves. That's usually what I mean by it's a counterbalance. When people say that a sacrifice is incredibly meaningful, so is redemption. So is continuing to live. So, those who are at odds are individuals who prefer the darkness because they see it as a virtual character, right? The virtual character, you reap what you sow, vengeance beget vengeance, eye for an eye. And then some people would say things like, oh, well, that's more authentic to the thing. I get it. I concede. That doesn't mean that I feel any better watching it happen, right? Like, someone not getting a second chance, that hurts. And if I were to choose something, I would choose Ex Machina. I would choose that this person, even despite a slim chance, has a second chance at redemption while holding all the burdens. You could even say it's even harder to continue living with your crimes and your stuff. So when I was playing Yakuza series, actually those are the parts that I love. Majima, right? Majima, Kiryu, they are the characters that run their redemption arcs. So naturally, it's more of a balance, but it leans towards brightness. And Casca, I disagree to some extent when people blind themselves and put their blinders on about like Yakuza 0 is when RGG really took off. Where like, oh, this is it. But they did a 180 after that. Like Yakuza 0 was, you know, in the mechanical department maybe, and so what, and like not so what, but and so. Yes, the quality was great, but when it comes to story, almost after Yakuza 0, they changed the tone of their things, and I would argue that was even bigger over time than Yakuza 0. I think there's a lot of like a bit of a echo chamber when it comes to Yakuza 0's like loud niche hardcore volume, but ultimately the people who are playing the game that aren't loud and they like playing the game, I think the Casca saga is far higher in reception. So, and it might have something to deal with a slightly brighter and hopefulness, because when you're playing games nowadays, you could argue that people aren't as happy anymore. And I talk about this a lot, where video game preferences is a form of escapism. And as much as I love Persona games and also like a Dragon games, how they talk about consequences and moody things, I talk about those things a lot, like depression, existential crises, scamming, maliciousness, and discrimination, racism. That's the core of much of my topics, and I use games and depictions of them as like Persona games, for example. However, we have to keep in mind that's what makes those games niche a lot of times. That's what makes these games still niche until they become slightly brighter. It's not that brighter is better. It's more so what I'm doing here. Your target audience may have a slightly preference for brighter things, not as dark as the things. And I'm still arguing that in terms of people who have played other Yakuza games, they're still leaning towards the darker side. So it can still be like, oh, this is a little too bright. However, it's nowhere near the preference of legacy players who are like hardcore, like give me all that depresso stuff. Like I want melodrama. I want like unnecessary violence that are, and maybe necessary violence is what they would say to sell the brutality of organized crime. And that is certainly a relic of 2009. Nowadays, I think the most casual audience who buy things, they like to see hardship, but they also like to see their characters, or these virtual characters, have a time to shine, like redemption. Like people who are very sad, they get rooted for, like Mine gets to be rooted for, and that's kind of what I understand about how they quote unquote retconned his death. It's a Cinderella story, and I kind of look forward to seeing what they will do with it. So that's kind of me though. And then when it comes to hardcore or softcore, honestly, ego, like this is kind of a bit of an ego lift situation. Like if you go to a gym, I can appreciate people who like to ego lift and like show off how impressive they are. For myself, I'm kind of too old for that. And for myself, I actually am fairly soft. I'm a pretty casual person when it comes to like how, I mean, there was a bit of rage bait. Like for me, there are parts of Kiwami 3, like I can kind of see the old DNA, and I've already gone through most of the gauntlets, like 100%ing. Like back in the day, the older games, the achievements require you to legitimately sit there and do the 100%. Like Yakuza 5's 100%. Whew, boy howdy, sitting there doing the rooster fighting stuff, like spinning the stuff or getting everything of everything over and over again. We did all that. It's good enough for me. I don't have to do all of those things. If they go and do them again, that's fine. I'll do it. Like I enjoy the experience every once in a while. But I'm a softie. I'm a fairly big softie. Like from soft games, whenever someone says, don't you want the reward for the challenge? Yeah. I already do that. I don't do it in my video games though. Like I don't need to do it in my video games, especially single player experiences. Like if I wanted a challenge for myself, I would go out and try to help people with their depressions. That's what I do on a regular basis. I try to encourage people to keep on studying, you know, go and have a chat with them, make sure that they're excited to share their progress with people. Beth is here. That's really wonderful that they're trying to learn Japanese. Like those are the challenges that I find most rewarding, talking to people. So if someone is coming at me and say, oh, don't you want your video games to be super challenging so that you can get reward? And I can appreciate if that is what gives your life reward, right? Like that's great. My reward does not come from video games being challenging. The most challenging things for me is talking to other people about video games. Like I play video games so I can do this most of the time. Like how do we make people happy when they play video games? How do we tug at their heartstrings and then give them what they want? Like that's people pleasing. I enjoy that video games is kind of an element of that. So when I think about when I'm playing a video game, I often think about, oh, what kind of players would be playing this game? Like, oh, this part is interesting. And the reason why I play video games now is because video games is a lifestyle. And I can use video games to communicate with other people. So like when someone says something like, oh, I'm a really mechanical forward person and I love the hardcoreness of getting slapped down, should really consider a FromSoft game, right? And I was like, oh, I don't want lots of yapping and stuff. Still starting to sound like a FromSoft game. So this is how I indirectly recommend things. I observe things And then you can line up your preferences and see if there's more things on for you than against you, right? And when it comes to budget and high fidelity, I expected a really large budget experience, honestly. Like, if I had to be really solid, my expectations, okay, maybe not too much, maybe a little bit more than Sega. And this works to the detriment, honestly. Somewhere in the back of my head, I had a feeling that maybe Sega would, like RGG would surprise me in this territory, but I was right on top, if not a little bit more on the budget friendly side. This was a budget title, and it pretty much hit the budget title. I'm still a little bit I still appreciate it that Dark Tides existed, and the Morning Glory stuff, that was wonderful how they did the Morning Glory stuff. And then the spin-off potential is worth its budget sufficiency, for sure. Like, if there's anything they could change that would dramatically create an impact, divisiveness, with the least amount of budget constraints, a constraint, is to dedicate your stuff to a character that was otherwise determined to be deceased, Mine. And they did it in a spectacular way that was so minimalistic that it kind of leads that budget friendly thing, right? How do you get the highest impact on budget? You change a pivotal moment. Not all the little TLCs and bell whistles like, oh, let's change Rikia's hairstyle, like the casting, right? There's a recast for Rikia, and then Nakahara got a recast. Those are great, but they probably took up even more budget than simply writing one scene where Mine survives. So, pretty budget oriented. It was right on top of what I thought it was. Typically remakes and stuff, I have some hotter takes a little bit near the end. Now, for easy listening, heavy, honestly, this is where I think that's what it was middling to me. I'm on the other side. I was expecting music to not be compromised, like heavier hitters, like a remix, an iconic like theme coming up more often. Like I was thinking of music being a forefront in this, so that was a big miss. And obviously here, despite Sega's attempt to spin off, yeah, I was thinking of spin off for sure. How they executed it obviously was at odds because they were being preservation. So this is what created my divisiveness. They leaned so hard on preservation despite wanting to spin off, and that's where I had mixed feelings. I'm like, oh yes, like we got something interesting, like they're gonna take it in a different direction, and now I look forward to playing the next game because I can always play Yakuza 4 remastered again to compare and contrast. But no, the game spent like 95% of it trying to preserve it. And then that one blip made me excited. So that's kind of how to wrap it up, right? And I got a few hot takes here. There are a few hot takes. What was it? Maybe I shouldn't go into it. It's okay. I think I covered most of the things. So you can kind of see the scatter thing, right? For the most part, the biggest issues, one of the biggest issues, I was not on board. I was not on board on one of the biggest issues. And then most of the stuff lines up with what Sega was planning, or at least within my expectations of what it is. But there are some divisiveness. Like, I think they kind of lean a little too hard on some of these. So, I know this is my attempt to try to organize all the information. So you can kind of see that legacy players pretty much, I would say, represent the bulk of the negativity against Sega's approach, because Sega took a different, like RGG take a different approach. Then you have mixed feelings from newish players, but largely they're semi favorable. There are certain properties that give it redeeming qualities from a legacy group, so that's where you get the ultimate idea that this is a 6 to 7 game, like a 6 to 7. Oh, and here are some hot takes, right? Hot takes. One hot take that I didn't touch upon, we'll add a few here that I want to make clear, so that I don't want to, I want to own these. It is more like here's my free sharing of my opinion, and I hope that maybe we'll have clarity in the future. Spin-off, please. That's a hot take from me, right? Casting is based on performance. I'll let those individuals interpret that. What I have said so far is about the casting. Oh, you know what? There is one other thing that I didn't consider here. And to me, there's still one more factor that I totally forgot. And that is voice acting, or more like dialogue. So heavy is like yap. Give the yaps, right? We have yappy and to the point. So straight to the point. I totally forgot about this, to kind of sideline the hot take that I was making. So for me, we got the, we got the legacy. I think legacy peeps are more like in the middle. I almost feel like they have a slight lean towards straight to the point. Not so much the yappy side of things. I think casual players are even more so straight to the point. And Sega, for this one, I think it still leans towards the left side. If in a yappy, when it comes to yappy, it's pretty yappy. And for myself, like, I don't mind yap. In fact, most of the time I'm yap. Like, I could sit there and watch well-written dialogue over straight to the point any day. I was actually expecting an expansion of the most yappiest parts of the game, but it didn't happen. And here's the thing, because I like vocal performances, or I like performances in general, so the visual fidelity and the performance, but we already talked about visual fidelity up here. It's too restrictive. Like, another hot take is that casting is based on performance, right? And we're talking about casting is based on vocal performance. And also, this is also restricted by fidelity. So these are hot takes where whenever the reason why I'm addressing why is casting is based on vocal performance, hot take. There's another issue in this game, which it deals with the greater politics. So there's a political issue, political and cultural issue when it came to the casting. And that's why this is slightly a hot take, because I'm only evaluating it based on casting is based on vocal performance, and it is also restricted by fidelity. So whatever can be seen by the cast, their vocal performances and stuff, comes with the idea that there are restrictions by the visual fidelity and the budget constraints, as well as the bias of thinking about geopolitics, cultural and geopolitics that weigh a lot on people's perception of their vocal performance. Like for example, for example, a vocal performance can improve over time. When someone dislikes someone's person, right? This is an ongoing thing. This has been ongoing. It's not only this game, but it has been exacerbated by this game, where there has often been a very loud voice that deals with the cultural and political concerns about the game outside of it. So the casting, there's been multiple like controversies dealing with casting, and that's imbuing the cultural and political issues that somehow bias the vocal performance and possibly even the restricted nature of what they have to work with, right? And these are a couple of hot takes, right? And spin-off, please, is a hot take. Spin-off, not retcon, right? That kind of thing. Those are kind of hot, quite a bit hot. Do I have anything else? No, not really. I thought we ended on a little bit spicy. So, and there's one little customary routine to end these segments, and it's typically an internet thing. This is where we provide ratings, right? And when I played this game, I feel like the ratings speak for themselves. I would say, so here are the ratings. How I perceive the ratings on the archetypes. So taking these into account, you can see a visualization of this. So when it comes to the ratings, the legacy player would likely give it a 6 out of 10. So it's arguably going to be one of the weaker efforts in RGG. I think the newish player will give it probably an 8 out of 10. And for myself, it comes as no surprise. I think this is a 7 out of 10. Right, in case people like to generalize all the things I said in like 3 hours time, or I think we spent like 2 hours this time. 2 hours time, those are the numbers that represent, right? And this is a little bit less messier than before. Usually these things go, I would have like little notes everywhere, and then there will be like multiple layers. So we're gonna try to do a less is more type of approach in the future. If I had a concluding remark, right? Let's do like a TLDR. We'll throw in a personal TLDR here. My TLDR is I am like not for me, and not for me in the way that too similar. So maybe we could say I'm not the target audience because for me I wanted change, not enough change. Or we could say too similar. to be a little bit more positive. Too similar. Change the storyline. Or change the content. Right? Change the story, write an alternative path. I'm all for that idea. So many of the changes did not do that. Love language, right? Language is great. Multi-language support. The too similar may also factor into business as usual. This is business as usual. Yeah. And a business as usual, more like a yearly release. Right? So that describes my 7, right? It's too similar. When I mean not for me, it's too similar. I've already been biased towards trying to play the same thing. And as a personal share, I've said this before. This is my first my first modern remake. So other people have played many of their modern remakes now, like Resident Evil fans have played the previous iteration and then a remake. This is my first remake. So where I've played a game and then I played its remake. This is my first one and it's not for me. I already knew it was not for me, despite really, I still enjoy it because it's 7 out of 10. But most of the time, this is what I play the game for. I like to think about the social networks and whatnot. So I still get all of the value out of it. The idea is I understand that I'm not the target audience for these things. I'm not nostalgic. I don't like weighing on nostalgia. Nostalgia is insufficient to make me academically interested beyond what I'm already interested. Like, I'm interested in this game for different reasons, but for the game itself, it's too similar. And someone is gonna come and say, well, that's the idea of a remake. You want to keep it similar and then add on top of it. It's like, I get it. And that's the TLDR. It's not for me. But I'm not evaluating it on that per se. So it's not like I'm giving it a 2 for being what it is. I actually anticipated that it is what it is. My TLDR is I'm not the target audience. It's too similar. I know what they're trying to do, still too similar. And I can acknowledge that other people prefer that, right? But there are other divisive choices that they made, and I like it for what it is different. Actually, the most different thing that they have done recently is multilingual support. And of course, this is a business as usual entry. I think I said relatively the same things with Pirate Yakuza from last year, nearly a year ago, right? So that's kind of it. That's what the 7 represents. It's a remake. I enjoyed it. It's not going to blow my socks off. In order to blow my socks off, it would have to exceed my expectations. When it's in my expectations, it's a 7, which is above average. I scale on 1 through 10. So 5 is average. This is an average entry. How did I get 7 for myself is what I expect from SEGA and how it lines up, not on its scope. Like, I'm not saying, oh, this isn't a Like a Dragon 9 game. This isn't a Like a Dragon 9. It is meeting my expectations. These are my expectations. And there is a stipulation, like up here, you're arguing for preservation. That is a slight nod. So I'm gonna concede some of it does involve being a remake per se, right? preservation is technically a property of remake, so I will concede that there is somewhat of a factor of preservation, but you can preserve and innovate at the same time. It is possible. Final Fantasy Remake, right? But these are cherry picking, so I'm gonna prevent myself from entering the idea of someone accusing me, oh, well, you're just cherry picking the best examples against the worst examples, etc. So outside of that, it is possible, but I'm not expecting it to be. So my rationale was, I imagine they would still preserve while having a focus of innovation, right? This actually wasn't my major issue. I disagree with the major issue that other people have. So these things have different weights. And for myself, I understand that when I'm buying a remake, the reason why I place Sega's, my interpretation of Sega's priorities or RGG's priority is that's kind of what I expected them to be doing. And in the green is my own preference. So what I actually think is the most realistic expectation is what I think RGG is. So this is where I think RGG was aiming for. And the divisiveness is what I see from all the other ones. And then my personal preferences is to give you a score of what would a game look like if it pandered to me. Like if RGG said, oh yeah, you know what? This MAKU guy, he knows what he's talking about. And he has good taste. So if look at what happens. If Sega decided to follow my preferences, it would be a divisive game. Especially given how newish players demand, in my opinion, and legacy players. Like if they targeted me, so if this game targeted me, right? They would be having a field day because it wouldn't satisfy. It would kind of be in between. So maybe it's still going to come out as a 7-ish. It would still come out as 7-ish. That's why it's a 7. If they targeted me, I would think that there's a chance that it would still come out as a 7 because all of my preferences are in between a lot of times, the two, or divisive one way or the other way. So that's my attempt to say, hey, here's my personal experience. I actually think Sega aimed for these things, and that's what I think created the score deficit. 6 out of 10 or lower from legacy players, 8, maybe 7 to 8 for newish players and uninitiated players, like players that are just crazy and decided I'm gonna start with Kiwami 3. It's very slim though. It's very small. Sega is playing at the idea that they re-release 0, 1, and 2 to encourage 3 as a thing. So refreshing 0, 1, and 2 was how they are trying to resolve that problem. Like, how do you get into a game in the middle of it, right? Quote unquote, in the middle of it. You can play the game and then go backwards or forwards. To me personally, it's irrelevant. I think people are smart enough to be interested in both prequels and sequels. So if you started with Kiwami 3, you can think of Yakuza 0, 1, and 2 as prequels, right? In fact, I kind of view it this way. The prequel trilogy is 0, 1, and 2. The middle is 3, 4, and 5. And then the sequels, the New Hope, the New Age, is 7, 8, and soon to be 9. Kind of like a Star Wars reference. Sorry, I'm making an indirect Star Wars reference. Or we can do a Star Trek thing. It's like the prequel, in my opinion, is more like the OG, the original generation. Still really good, but contentious. The middle of the pack is like next gen. There's a lot more substance that were built on the OG, And then the following stuff is like a refinement. Maybe like Deep Space Nine or something like that. It's a little bit more endearing, and I like most of the stuff. Right, Star Wars might not translate very well in this example because people are very strong about that. The Star Wars release schedule was not in that order. It was the OG was the middle group, right? The prequel came after, and then the New Hope is for a new generation, or like the newer trilogies is for a new generation. Yeah, I like this format. It's a little bit dodgy in places. I'm gonna try to make it as streamlined as possible. And then we'll add one last section, which is gonna be the hot take section. Maybe something of fun TLDR at the end. All of these things, I think most of my thoughts are here. The reason why I'm gonna do it this way is because I found it dissatisfying to basically say what's in the game. I think I'll leave it up to other people to find out what's in the game, right? Sometimes I could list like a few examples, like for example, how many sub-stories there are, how many mini games there are, or what type of combat system it is. But I think I'll leave that up to mostly all the other people who are covering these things professionally, right? Or like they're doing it for a living. They can tell you like, oh, this part is fun, or like this game has like 4-button action controls, or it comes with less sub-stories and compare numbers. I think I'm moving away from that. I like doing this quite a lot. I can do this for days. How can I create a system where there's a visual representation, and then there's the way I laid this out is so that I can appeal to the bipolar nature of internet questions. Is this game innovative, or is this game preservative? It's preservative, right? Does this game add things to it, or do they trim things, right? So you can get those, but then there's resolution in between. So now you can sort of say, okay, so if you're leaning towards this, it's kind of towards that. So we might start switching up the color scheme and whatnot to make it a little bit more identifiable, but I like this representation. This is closer to what's going on in my head. So whenever someone says, hey, do you recommend this game? They're asking yes or no. And my answer, oftentimes, I would say 95% of questions directed towards me when I'm in a position of experience, as in I have a lot of experience with something, it's never a 1 or 0. Like, to me, it's never a 1 or 0. However, that doesn't mean I should avoid and not answer those questions. When a stranger meets, they typically want to ask bipolar, binary questions. I often call them double barrel questions. That used to be a thing. It's a gun metaphor, obviously, because of other things. But double barrel questions it's either yes or no, it's either good or bad, it's either the best or the worst, it's either lazy or exciting, it's either cheap or expensive, right? These are the internet hustle culture net speak. And I wanted to situate it like that. And now my attempt to make this different this is how I view things in my head. So whenever someone asks me, hey, do you have any recommendations? Would you recommend this? I'm like, yes and no. Can you tell me a little bit more about yourself so I can understand where you are, right? In which subgroup are you? If you constitute a new subgroup, I will try to match you with the most consistent subgroup so that when you say something like, I like darker tone games. I'm like, okay, can you tell me a little bit more? So then I can like go to my glossary of video games and could suggest various things. And the moment I suggest various things, they are attached to examples. Like, this game has been told to be very Japanese oriented, right? And how is it Japanese oriented? I haven't wrote any specifics. All of these things like yappy, canon, um, heavy, they all have specific examples attached to them. But I'm not going to go over those examples. I think it does. It can kind of do a disservice to RGG. I've already played the game, so you can watch the game if you want. If you're talking about very specific examples. However, in these reviews, much like other editorials and journalists, they're largely spoiler free. Like, you can kind of see that the vast majority of what I said, and I'm going to be very apparent about all of these, they're usually very spoiler free. Like, minimally spoiling the game. The idea is we're talking about behavior now. How would you feel? How you make your decisions? I focus on executive function, so usually it profiles an archetype, right, a perspective, and then you can inform your own decision. And this is more my approach to, if someone asks me, do you think I would like this game? Here you are. Like, are any of these things listed in a binary state interesting to you? And then here's the relative target audience. And I gave you some relative target audience so that you can measure yourself to the community. Like, what I mean by that is, if you're new and you're like, this is gonna be my first Like a Dragon game, what do you think it's like? Like, if I start playing this game, what are the type of people and their preferences? How do I get caught up with the mythos of the game? Well, here are some preferences. There are some newish players that represent a very large population now, and then the legacy players, which represent a very large population, and together they probably represent the large majority of the target audience. And RGG is trying to strike a balance most of the time on catering to either one of these groups, then a mix of these groups. So if any of these things sound interesting to you, like if they kind of describe you, give it a go, right? As opposed to me trying to predict, like, you know, probe every single person, like, oh, but you like this, but not this, and you kind of like this. It would be very difficult for me. It's not scalable. I do love conversation though, so this is where I would end my bit, right? If you're gonna watch this later, right? ありがとうございます。感謝、谢谢, right? 感謝、感謝. Thank you very much. You are more than welcome to come on by and follow along if you want on my next game. The next game will be Persona 3 Portable. I'm gonna start my second legacy, which also is Sega adjacent. We're moving on to Atlas. And the reason why I pick Atlas is because multilingual things related with its subject matter. So we're going to start our Persona legacy. So you're more than welcome to follow along, or you can wait for these type. I will have a video in the beginning and at the end that tries to summarize this very nature. Try to keep it spoiler free, right? Outside of like allusions to other games. And yeah, you're more than welcome to come on by and yap, share your hot takes, talk about where you line up on this. Obviously, this is not factual. Perspectives and archetypes are not factual. They are correlations that if I, right, for example, would be selling a game, the marketing and the optics would represent this, at least in my opinion. And that's kind of where I wanted to stop. I end the sentiment because you're always free to come on by, yap, talk about how your perspective combines X, Y, and Z, and you can play the game still, right? That's it. That's kind of a win-win. I get to express what I think of the community at the moment, what I think the developer and or publisher is prioritizing, and we can compare notes. are always welcome to do so. And that is kind of the whole idea of focusing on executive function and behavior. Because we make decisions, we try to be satisfied with it. I can play a very, very terrible game that is not marketed towards me. Like, for example, a game that's not marketed towards me. A lot of people would say it's a pass because it's terrible or etc. I play a game for academic enrichment. Largely, games, movies, and books are a way to connect with other people. And I play games to get closer to other people if they can. So if you're one of those people who I have spoken to over a length of time, you can kind of get the picture. I yap a lot because that is what I want to do for being online and sharing my thoughts. I want other people to be encouraged to do so in a respectful and welcoming way, because you're more than welcome to disagree with me on most of these things outside of the existence of these issues or quantities. The things that are in red are true, as in they have already happened. The things in blue-ish, on the blue spectrum, are what I think is the pattern of behavioral preferences that you notice from observing the red. And then the green is my personal opinions, the things that I pick some specifics regarding those behaviors. I didn't add any game specifics because I think you can find those, and they're there for you to discover. I think RGG and any other game developer and publisher would have it no other way than having someone point people that would want to like their game in the direction of their game without compromising the nature of it. And then of course, all of my games, my play-alongs, right, my playthroughs are available on YouTube, provided that it doesn't violate any of the TOS for the game. Like, I'm not even sure if I can play Persona games on release, but as far as I know, RGG is fine with playing the game on release, but it takes me much longer than a launch period to finish these bits. And for that, I hope that it is transformative enough to represent contributions to them. I like that people get to make informed decisions outside of the influence of mere exposure, and then choosing by their agency to want to be interested in something. And that's why I decided to take this approach and refined it over time. I've been doing this for over 2 years now, so I've gone through some refinements. You're more than welcome to come on by. Otherwise, my main motivation to doing all this is self-reflection. I'm testing the limits of my understanding and my investment in people, not necessarily the game is a bonus. Like, I'm invested in RGG, right? I invest in the people that make things. As much as fictional characters can take a life of their own, I think it is very important to keep in mind that people are motivated to make things. People give each other privileges. People offer privileges and, lens into their minds. And this is my attempt to get lens into mine. This is what I think about most of the time when I'm playing a video game. I think about how am I enjoying this game, but what does this game can serve for another reason, and who is this for? That kind of thing strikes my fancy. When I read a book, I say the same thing. I'm like, that's an interesting way to write this particular paragraph. I wonder what the author's motivation was to do this. Film direction, language learning, communication. That's what we're focusing on here. So I know that was a really long outro, but yes, welcome anytime. I'm usually language learning from now on, but the next game is Persona 3 Portable, and then we're gonna run through the Persona Legacy until next year, which I'm expecting Stranger Than Heaven to have some sort of announcement. Until then, 大家下次见。はい、感謝观看。はい、皆さんまたね。見てくれてありがとう。Thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye bye.